really like White's bishop pair here.
Yeah, we've got a bishop's two bishops versus a bishop and a knight. I actually thought that Sergey might try bishop d6, but this also looks compelling, of course. Queenside castles by Meyer. There's no e5 yet in the game, but still Karjakin's decided to relocate that bishop because we didn't want to fall to any e5 ideas later.
Right. Always good to play Karpovy in chess, everybody. Don't leave your pieces in potential areas where tactics could happen. Keep them safe. Classic Sergey Karjakin there.
F3 with the idea of king f2, getting the king into the game. Notice that Sergey is not trying to play bishop s6. Sure, it would weaken Georg Meier's king, but Sergey assesses his chances are a lot better with two bishops. Never mind that structural advantage you could create after bishop f6. And I think that's very important because the stronger the player, the more likely they are to hold the tension even in a blitz contest.
Agreed totally. And again, the way we've seen Karjakin play for the first 3 games just reminds me of why he's such a great player. You know, he just doesn't make, he gives his opponents opportunities to make mistakes, doesn't make a lot of mistakes himself, not going to change the position if he doesn't have to, as you said. He's not going to go take on f6. He's just going to kind of sit here and have a time advantage. He's now up again about a minute and a half on time. And you know, it's one of the things we saw him do super well in the World Championship match against Magnus Carlsen. Just play solid chess and let the game come to him, so to speak. I already feel, even though I have no right to say it yet based on the position, but I just feel really confident he's going to win this game too because he's got a small edge, and I don't think he's going to make mistakes. And if this pattern continues where Georg is going to get under time pressure.
I would agree with you, but I gotta remember that game too, where Karjakin had a big edge in the end game, and Meyer was able to hold.
That's true, and it was also a French, so certainly the history of what they've played so far. But I guess I look at this one as even easier for White to play. Okay, b5 is played. It makes sense. Maybe he wants to prevent the move c4. Everybody kind of kicking this knight out of a strong post. So b5 is a good move by Georg. So the question is, will Sergey play b3 and c4 and maybe try to open up the light squares?
Or just a4, maybe
or even a4.
b3, the slower option. That's a strong idea indeed. He needs to create a weakness, and he's playing rookie.
But he may still go for your plan. I mean, if a4 comes in, we may get some lines where if the queen side opened up here, moves like the other rook coming to b1 quickly, we see the 2 bishops and the open b file against the black king could really be devastating for Georg. So I think your idea of a4 may still come in here.
Yeah, perhaps we're going to see something like rook to a1.
So the question is, f6, does it really threaten e5? It might, right? If you can get this bishop to move, this c3 pawn falls. So now, everybody, the point of f6 was that if White makes some sort of random move, e5 would have come in and then removed the defender of the c3 pawn. So Sergey says, not happening. I'm going to stop e5 right now.
And now knight c7, because bishop f3 was a strong idea. If with the knight still on b5, that would have been a decent move. So instead, and now let's move king e1. Okay, so Sergey's saying, let's trade off the rooks.
Yeah, he assesses his chances better with the major pieces off the board. That might be because he sees that he'll have easier access to the pawns on the king side, right? There's this idea of bishop f8 coming in. So if all the rooks came off, Black would have to worry about ideas of this bishop coming around and targeting these weaknesses here.
Bishop f8 is going to become an issue anyway. That's why rook d5 was played, because now at least bishop f8, we can take it. But that is a big idea if we can ever get that in. And
ooh, I like that move.
What a move.
What a great move by Sergey.
Rook c5.
Points out, everybody. Yeah, rook takes c5 is not a threat because the rook would hang, and now he's going to get exactly what Jen and I said he wanted. He's going to force these rooks off the board and renew the threat of the bishop coming to f8.
Yikes. That's a really good idea. So somehow I think Meyer's going to have to deal with that by fixing his pawns so that we can play g6. I mean, what else can we do? So maybe we're going to have to take on d2, and then after king takes d2, play something like h5, so that at least we can meet bishop f8 with g6 or g5.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But instead,
it makes sense.
he thinks that the pure bishop endgame is too bad, so he plays.
Well, one of the key things that makes rook e8 work too, everybody, is that I was just going to say rook d7. You would love to put a rook on the 7th rank and start targeting pawns, but the move king to c6 would have been a fork of the rook and bishop, and so I think that was probably the reason that Sergey went for rook to d6 instead. Oh, and look at that! Now he's switching gears. He's going over to the queen side.
And now is bishop g4 doing anything? Doesn't look like it. F5 seems fine, so he just calmly gets his king out of the way.
Yeah, I agree. And as we take a look at the players here, and Sergey doing a small shuffle, he's hardly breathing. I mean, I'm not even. He's such a machine there. Sergey's very focused. Georg is leaning in, and again, he having to make tough decisions under time pressure, Jen. I mean, this is one of the ways you see the stronger players be better, is that the games are equal for a while, but the time isn't. And then when we get to the end game, the time is what makes the lower rated player blunder.
Yikes. So knight e8, I'm wondering about the move c5 in some position, because that pawn on a6 can be taken as an in-between move. So...
Yeah, agreed.
But rook b8 check played by Sergey.
And he finally gets this plan of bishop f8.
The knight is defending for the moment, but the problem is some kind of bishop h5 can come in as well. Just rook back to b4 for now. We had no way to stay on that file.
I'm still waiting for the move c5 to come in. Okay, now he plays it. And I like this move because in this case it actually opens up the rook along the 4th rank, but it also maybe opens up this bishop on e2 to be hitting the pawn on a6 momentarily. That could be critical. Okay, so the bishop comes to a6. Well, rook c6. Black is defending, but black doesn't have a lot of options. Jen, what if white just starts a plan like king e3 and king up to d4 and just, you know, and here he goes. He's on the path to just improving his position.
Yeah, it's obviously a very dangerous place for your rook on c6. Rook b6, and now we're going to be cornering this pawn on a6, so king b7 forced. Now, decision for Sergey to take that pawn.
That was a little surprising to me that Sergey transitioned the way he did, but I guess likely this h-pawn will be enough. Look at that bishop dominate the knight. That is an example of why bishops can be better than knights in the endgame with such a beautiful square on e5.
How's he going to stop the h-pawn? That's the danger.
Yeah, I mean, the knight now has to leave, and watch, here we go, right? The h-pawn is on the pursuit of happiness, and he's going to find it on h8. Okay, king to d4. I assume white doesn't want to go to the obscure bishop ending just yet, so I'm anticipating a move like king to d4 to come in. Oh, whoa, he retreats the king. Why that, I wonder?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that at some point black's going to have to play this move f4 to stop the pawn from just running all the way down the board, right?
Yeah. And he has to give that light square bishop, yeah, a chance to help defend. And
that's why, so Sergey's blockading the pawn on f4. So now after knight f4, king f4, the pawn is just racing down the board and there's no stopping it. What a conception. So king c6, h5, how are we stopping that pawn? After we can just play h6 here, right?
h6 is one, and he also just calculated that I think he can just take. I was going to say I think he can just take, and I don't see a clear path for this. I mean, the knight needed to get to f6 before the pawn was on h7, and Georg knows it, and so he throws in the towel, and Sergey shuffles in his seat one more. He's feeling super confident right now. He's got to be with a 3-game lead. I feel like I only see Karjakin take a breath once the game is over.